To Nevada now, where the 2020 candidates are making final pitches ahead of tomorrow's caucuses. In a new poll, Senator Bernie Sanders is surging across the state with a double-point lead, and this comes after winning the New Hampshire primary last week.
Now that Sanders has emerged as the frontrunner, other candidates are ramping up attacks against him. Ed O'Keefe has more from Las Vegas.
The fact is, Bernie has had a very different record than me for a long time.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is calling out Senator Bernie Sanders' past opposition to legislation that would have toughened gun laws.
He voted against it 5 times in the House of Representatives.
And in a state still reeling from one of the worst mass shootings in history, Biden's campaign also unveiled this ad.
I don't know that you hold a gun manufacturer responsible for what obviously a deranged person does.
Sanders has since reversed that position, and on Thursday was endorsed by the co-founders of the gun control group March for Our Lives.
I'm proudly endorsing Bernie Sanders for president because he understands the actions that must be taken to curb this issue.
Also new today, another anti-Sanders ad from a moderate Democratic group raising concerns about the health of the 78-year-old senator.
Oh, and he recently just had a heart attack.
Biden isn't the only candidate taking swipes at Sanders.
If we choose a candidate who appeals to a small base like Senator Sanders, it will be a fatal error.
Speaking of the former New York City mayor, after a tough debate performance this week, Mike Bloomberg is scheduled to be off the campaign trail in the coming days, preparing for next Tuesday's debate. But Senator Elizabeth Warren once again called on Bloomberg to release former employees from non-disclosure agreements.
If he's not willing to remove those gags and let those women and maybe those men talk, then he is disqualified from being president of the United States.
Warren, after disappointing showings in Iowa and New Hampshire, is facing her own questions about whether she can turn things around in Nevada.
I need to do what I've done pretty much all my life, and that is get out there and fight for working families. That's me. That's what I do.
And Ed O'Keefe is now with us from Las Vegas. So, Ed, as we mentioned, Senator Sanders has a significant lead in the most recent polls, especially in Nevada, despite losing the state to Hillary Clinton back in 2016. And with all of his recent momentum, does it appear that he is on his way to the 1991 that you need, 1991 in terms of delegates to take that nomination?
1,991 of the roughly 3,500 delegates? Not necessarily. Good morning, guys, because first of all, it's tricky to poll in this state, especially when it comes to a caucus. It's just really difficult between the fact that most of the voters in this state live here in the Las Vegas area, up in Reno, the fact that you have to do polling in at least 2 languages. Pollsters will tell you this is a tricky one to read, but most surveys have shown Sanders essentially with a comfortable lead. This is only the third, though, of 55 total contests, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. At least that's what the other candidates would say. And yet, if he continues to rack up wins, one wonders, does this help him in South Carolina to either get close to Joe Biden or to top him? What does it do for his Super Tuesday standings, even though he'll face Mike Bloomberg in some of these bigger states? We'll see. But what's becoming more evident week after week is if you're someone who doesn't like Bernie Sanders or the prospects of him being the Democratic nominee, your options to stop him are narrowing because the math to 1991 becomes trickier with fewer states, even though there are some big prizes yet to come.
So most of the candidates on the debate stage were probably hoping for a bit of a debate bounce as they sort of head into the Nevada contest, except for Bloomberg. He's probably hoping to bounce back a little. He's got some time. He's not on the ballot. But do you think that he's going to be able to sort of regain the momentum, especially as we look forward to the next debate, which is in South Carolina?
Well, we know he's going to spend the next few days off the trail practicing, essentially. I think now that they have him on stage with one debate and the tape to prove that he needs to work on a few things. Our understanding is that he will be off the trail until Monday night when he does a CNN town hall in Charleston, and then Tuesday night when he joins us for our debate there. He's got some work to do. His team will tell you that. They also saw some glimmers of hope, especially in the second half of the debate, when he leveled some zingers against Bernie Sanders, when he seemed to make a broader point that the party needs to really think about the kind of Democrat it could potentially nominate to take on the president. We spoke with supporters of his yesterday on our way here in Salt Lake City. There were a few hundred people at a rally he held there, and they said, yeah, you know, not the greatest debate performance by anybody, but held his own. He'll have more of an opportunity. And ultimately, those kinds of voters that showed up there are looking for whoever it is can knock off the president, can afford to knock off the president, and they believe generally that's Mayor Bloomberg. If he continues to make that argument in the next 10 days or so before Super Tuesday, his first big test, it could work. And remember, you don't have to win these states. You just got to be hitting 15% support to be accruing delegates. And so Bloomberg knows. It doesn't mean he has to win 14 states. He's just got to perform at 15% or better to be amassing enough delegates to remain a factor and somehow find a way to defeat Bernie Sanders.
Ed, as you know, CBS News is reporting that Bloomberg is looking past the other Democratic candidates and is trolling President Trump instead. And I know that people have said in the wake of 2016, when President Trump was seeking the nomination, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and others tried to play the Trump game of using sort of childish language and trolling, but it never seemed to work with them. And it only worked with President Trump. He was the only one that was tolerable to his supporters. But I wonder if even in the last 4 years, that narrative has changed, because Mayor Bloomberg is putting a lot of money into some billboards across the Southwest.
Yeah, and for him, it's really not a lot of money. But there will be some billboards going up here in Las Vegas today that are designed to troll the president in various ways, pointing out that he didn't win the popular vote, pointing out that there's already been some problems with his border wall down along the Mexican border, even one suggesting that he likes to eat overcooked steak and that Bloomberg prefers his medium rare. All of this is just designed to get under the skin of the president, to provoke some tweets, to provoke some nasty comments, perhaps at his campaign rally here later today. And if that's Bloomberg's MO, if he thinks that's what's going to work, so be it. The question will be ultimately, as you were kind of alluding to, is this what voters want to stomach for the next several months through the general election? Bloomberg's big selling point is, I can afford to do this, both in terms of I have a perfectly fine reputation, thank you very much. I've made my fortune, I've lived a good life, and I have the money to spend that he does not have, to just continue attacking him both on policy and personality, on character, and on the other aspects of his presidency. And, you know, as he's pointed out, I'm a guy from New York, one of those guys that this president was trying to get to like him and to take him seriously. And yes, there were times when we did, but now we think he's a big joke. And so, you know, he thinks that just some sense of sort of political psychological warfare could potentially work against the president and win back the White House for Democrats.
So
It's interesting. If he does take the bait and start to attack Bloomberg on the stage, then I guess that's considered working, right?
It totally does. It totally does. It means that kind of the president thinks that you are the threat, the primary threat, right? Possibly. Right. So listen, Senator Elizabeth Warren really took aim at Bloomberg on the stage, and I've heard some people say that maybe that was a misguided attack because the front runner continues to be Bernie Sanders, and she's still attacking Bloomberg. Why do you suppose she's focused on Bloomberg and not Bernie Sanders?
It's a good question, because tactically you're right. If you want to win, you got to go after the winner, and right now the winner is Bernie Sanders. I think she understands that in the first four contests at this point, the results may be somewhat baked, and there's very little chance for her to prevail or to hit one or two. But in those Super Tuesday contests, where she will be on the ballot alongside Mike Bloomberg, there is an opportunity to put up some sharp contrasts. That includes her home state of Massachusetts, California, Colorado, Georgia, Virginia, North Carolina, places like that. And so she may be looking beyond these first four to say, look, when you're a voter in one of those 14 states, when you vote in Arizona and Illinois and Florida later in March, if she's still on the ballot, and you're looking for options, just keep in mind that I take issue with the fact that he's spending his billions on this. I'm somebody who isn't. And provides an alternative. She also, I think, in bringing up the NDA issue, or as one Bloomberg supporter yesterday called him an MBA, which shows you how little some voters understand and appreciate about this complex issue, which I think potentially works in Bloomberg's favor ultimately. It's a reminder of sort of the boss-employee dynamic, but also a gender dynamic. That ultimately, many of those NDAs may have to do with gender discrimination, with sexual harassment, with issues that have dominated the Me Too debate in recent years. There is a subset of the Democratic Party who understandably and justifiably is concerned about and thinks about that now as a major voting issue of concern, and Warren is trying to win those people over.
Really fascinating. Ed, thank you so much as always. We appreciate it.